And today I'm going to tell you by means of 3 very specific examples how to apply the action engine in your finance processes. Or in other words, how to empower every accountant in your company to work smarter. We're going to be very specific. Nevertheless, to begin with, let me outline the 3 major initiatives a current CFO or VP Finance is concerned with. And the first one is working capital. So how can we make sure to optimize our cash in and outflows by means of acting intelligently? Second initiative is around productivity and automation. How can we make sure that all our accountants work like in the best way possible to process as many invoices as efficiently as possible? And thirdly, how can we deal with the topic of risk and compliance to avoid and prevent incompliant or unnecessary payments? And the use case examples I'm going to present will be located in each of these 3 major initiatives. And let's start with the first example right away. And the first example will be located in the area for the action engine. Maybe to wrap up what the action engine is all about, in case you have not experienced it before, the value proposition that we want to convey with the action engine is to empower everyone in your company to work smarter. Just as Celonis in general, the action engine is based on the process mining technology that we pioneered. And in short, and to my mind, it consists of extracting and connecting the digital footprints across your operational systems. So if we talk about a finance process, this means whenever you're booking an invoice, whenever you're changing payment terms, whenever you're conducting a payment, but also whenever you're creating a purchase order that will later on result in an invoice, all these digital footprints will be covered and connected by means of this technology. And this is also the key enabler for the action engine, which main purpose is to maximize the business impact of your day-to-day operations by enabling everyone, and by everyone I mean every single accountant, to take the right action at the right time. So how does this reflect in the finance process? And what are the use cases that we observe in the manifold customer projects that I'm also personally involved in? And to my mind, there are 3 use case areas of focus topics that have proven to be very relevant and valuable to many of our customers. The first topic, and I'm going to align way more concrete use cases around that. The first topic is around optimal payment timing. So how can we ensure to pay every single invoice at the best time and point possible? Neither too late in order not to lose cash discounts, nor too early in order to not have early cash outflows and a negative impact on working capital there. A second major topic is around the area of what I would call efficient invoice handling. So how can we make sure that automation is raised as best as possible? And how can we make sure that inconsistencies that require manual rework are resolved as efficiently as possible to simply deal with the high volume of invoice processing? And last but not least, how can we deal with payment compliance to avoid incompliant or duplicate payments? First thing first, let's start with the topic of optimal payment timing. And I want to start with one very precise customer example that, however, is to my mind very scalable, applicable to many other customers. And this example is located in the area of cash discounts. We have implemented this example at a healthcare company, and the challenge that this customer had to solve was that their shared service center had lost an incredible amount of $650,000 in 2018 due to unrealized cash discounts. And actually, this amount has been twice the amount of cash discounts they had lost in 2017. So there really was an urge to react on that, and the goal was to improve that in 2019 naturally. Another challenge which actually caused this problem in the first place was that they had a variety of systems and processes involved in this payment process, which made it very difficult for them to understand the root cause and to understand where to tackle the issue. The solution that we then implemented, and I'm going to show you a live demo of this in a second, is the following. In the first step, we used a very simple Celonis analysis, and I'm sure you could do this on your own, to reveal the root causes. So where in the process do we lose time, and which part in the process causes us to not realize the cash discount? And in their example, the main root cause turned out to be slow payment block removals. So whenever something, with the invoice was wrong, they had a payment block in place, and those payment blocks were removed manually. However, this payment block removal didn't take place on time, and that's where they lost most of their time, and that's the main cause for them to not pay the invoices on time. So that's why in the solution approach with the Action Engine, we provided every accountant in their department with smart recommendations of which payment blocks to remove at which point in time. So actually we looked at the cash discount due date of each invoice, and as soon as this cash discount was at risk and a payment block was in place, we used this to automatically forward the recommendation to the accountant and also help the accountant to remove this payment block directly out of our application with a single click to have the maximal impact on both process efficiency and working capital. From a business outcome, this project has been implemented, I'd say 3 months ago, and they could already measurably observe that they have a 90% reduction of the cash discounts they lose, as well as an increased productivity by accountant in terms of number of invoices processed by day, simply due to that intelligent prioritization. And if we think about why they relied on Celonis to do that, then I'd say that there are 2 major reasons. The first one is that with the simple process analytic capability, they detected the main root cause for their issue, which again was slow payment block removals. And with the Action Engine, they were then able to create a root cause specific and real-time solution for their accountants. So how does this look like for them, and how can you imagine it from a software perspective? And to do that, let me show you how it looks like from the accountant perspective. So let's assume I'm Stefan working as an accountant in my company. And the first thing that happens every day, say at 9 a.m. in the morning, is that I receive, as an example, an email directly from the Action Engine where it says that there are 2 new signals for me. This means 2 new recommendations or opportunities to intervene. And these 2 signals tell me that there are 2 particular invoices for which the cash discount is at risk because the payment block yet needs to be removed. And if we have a look at this first example, we see that by just removing the payment block for this one particular invoice on time, I could realize a cash discount of more than $4,000. So that's really worthwhile spending a bit of time on, right? For the accountant, that's simply a single click. So I could just click on this signal in order to receive all the context relevant information that I need as an accountant. So here, the accountant gets all the information he or she needs at one place without having to manually log into manifold systems and collect this data. So in this particular example, I'm told that for this particular invoice from vendor CEB Barcelona, the payment block is still in place. However, the goods have been received in the meantime. So actually, the partial delivery, which has caused this payment block in the first place, has now been completed by the vendor. So I can now manually trigger this payment block removal in order to make sure that I'm realizing this cash discount of $4,334. And as I said, it's all about context information. So also by looking at the details, I see the precise and exact process flow for this particular invoice. And I see that on October 4, the payment block has been set. However, in the meantime, like yesterday, the goods receipt has taken place, which has actually triggered this recommendation, and which I think nicely highlights how the process mining technology kicks in to create this recommendation to me. For me as the accountant, this is the context information on the one side, but also the central place to trigger the necessary action on the other side. So on the right-hand side, I see the actions that I can take, which have been configured, and most prominently, I can trigger the payment block removal directly in the operational system, like SAP as an example. So by clicking on this button, I trigger this workflow by means of really the deep integration, and I get the success message that the payment block has been removed successfully from this invoice. So long story short, while this use case requires some complex analysis in terms of recognizing these invoices, with the Action Engine, we have now automated this analysis. We have forwarded the recommendation to the business user, and we have helped him or her to take the action with a single click. So we have reduced a lot of complexity for the business user and help him through her or his daily life. And in this example, and as I said, it's really the precise example of what we did there. In this example, it proved to be very effective, and they started in 2 countries, but are now about to roll out the very same kind of Action Engine use case in 3 other European countries. Before I continue with the second use case, just one remark. You also have the possibility to post questions during this webinar. So please feel free to also post the questions directly in the chat. I will try to answer them in the last couple of minutes, or at least answer them in the follow-up for everyone to address all the remarks, annotations, or whatever you have in mind. We have dealt with the first use case in the area of working capital. However, there is a second use case in the area of optimal payment timing that I would like to share. And the second use case has been implemented for a top 10 manufacturer. And I think this is also a really valuable one in terms of working capital optimization. So what is this all about? For this customer that we were looking at, the major challenge was that they were using a lot of different payment terms for the same vendor. So actually they had single vendors for which they were using up to 70 different payment terms in the way they paid the corresponding invoices. And if you just think about what an optimization would impact, then actually the negative impact or the potential on working capital by rather utilizing the best out of these 70 different payment terms was $30 million per year. So it's really a huge use case that we want to tackle here, and which applies to a couple of customers to my mind. How does the solution approach look like? In this example, we implemented a machine learning algorithm. It's actually a rather simple one, so you can use it as well, that automatically compares for each single invoice the payment terms on the invoice, on the corresponding purchase order, and on the master data or a supplier contract that is in place for this particular vendor. So you're basically, for each invoice, comparing these 3 different sources of payment terms that you could apply. And by automatically calculating the best payment terms out of those, the Action Engine will create a recommendation for this accountant which payment terms to use for a particular invoice. And again, the accountant can then directly adjust the payment terms on the invoice out of the Action Engine application. And I've really seen this for a couple of customers. So just to give you a bit of background, I've seen customers who always use the payment terms on the invoice to pay the invoice. I've seen customers who always use the payment terms on the purchase order to pay the invoice, regardless of which payment terms are printed on the invoice. But I think by means of this comprehensive and intelligent algorithm, you can really optimize or realize a lot of potential here. And the estimated business outcome for this example, it is huge, so it's still ongoing use case. And again, if we think about why Celonis makes sense here, I think besides the machine learning model that we have put into place here, simply the ease and speed of deploying the solution has been the decisive factor. Because again, with the process mining technology, you can connect the finance data to the procurement data. So that's why this comparison between invoice, purchase order, and master data is actually quite easy. How does this look like in the software? And if we jump back to the demo environment, then this would look as follows. So from the accountant's perspective, if we look at this example, again, he or she would receive an email or in the signal list, simply see one of these items saying, hey, you have a payment term optimization here. Please adjust the incoming invoice. And by clicking on this item, the accountant would see that for this particular invoice from the vendor Tiefland Glas AG, the invoice payment terms differ from the payment terms in the supplier contract. So actually in this example, by utilizing the contract rather than what's written on the invoice, the payment blocks, the payment terms can be increased from 15 days to 20 days with a corresponding effect on working capital of nearly $500 for this one invoice only. And just imagine every accountant contributing to that, it quickly sums up to a really huge amount. And again, if I as an accountant then decide to update the payment terms, I can trigger this action directly out of the action engine to make use of this suggestion. So now we have dealt with two examples in the area of optimal payment timing and working capital. So let's now move to one example located in the second focus topic, which was efficient invoice handling. And the use case example that I brought with me for this focus topic is about three-way match violations. So a lot of customers, as an inefficiency or as a major time consumption in their accounting department, observe that three-way match violations, so differentiation, like deviations between invoice, purchase order, and goods receipt, these three-way match violations require a lot of manual investigation effort, right? Because you have to find out where the inconsistency comes from and also how to resolve it in order to pay the invoice. So for this particular customer and example, the root cause for these three-way match violations were inconsistencies in the purchase order and the master data. So actually, like the master data and therefore also the purchase order were outdated in terms of prices. And that's why the invoice that was incoming from the supplier didn't match the price that was given in the PO or the master data. And again, while you might already have a solution in place that recognizes these three-way match violations, the major question is, how do you find out where they come from? And that's typically the time-consuming part. And that's why the solution we put into play here is, again, by means of the action engine, have this automated recognition of where the deviations come from. And again, this proactive recommendation to the accountant what to do to resolve this inconsistency as quickly as possible. So from the demo perspective, this would look like as follows. So if I look at the example in finance, and if I look at this example here, then I would receive, again, as an accountant, I would receive the signal, hey, you have outdated prices here. Please adjust the material master. And by entering the corresponding signal, I'd see that for the past 7 invoices from this vendor, Alway Industries, I was not able to pay the invoices automatically because there has been a deviation by means of prices. And more precisely, the deviation comes from the difference between the invoice price and the price in the master data. Actually, if I look below, I also get a more detailed information of these 7 incidents in the past that are referred to, and I see that the master data price is actually not matching the invoice price for these past 7 items. And it's pretty clear how to intervene in this example, right? Talking about intervention, just as usual, you can integrate these actions for the business user here, such that, again, by means of the click on the action engine, he would trigger the corresponding master data adjustment and hopefully not only resolve these 7 incidents, but also every incident in the future to come. One last example that I wanted to share, again, we wanted to keep this very focused today. The last example I want to share is related to this third focus topic around payment compliance. And here, one of the top use cases I have observed is around duplicate invoices. So prevent the payment of duplicate invoices. And the inefficiency that we see for many customers is that many customers have different channels on how they receive invoices, right? Some invoices might enter by EDI, some by fax, some by email. So you have different channels. And what can happen is that by means of this automated scan of these incoming invoices, subtle deviations or failures in the scanning process can lead to duplicate invoices in the system. So to give you 2 examples, sometimes we observe that the price that is scanned on the invoice differs with respect to the comma. So instead of $100.70, it might read $1,001.70. So you might have very small failures in the scanning process leading to 2 different invoices in your system. And the danger is that you obviously do not recognize that and that you pay this same invoice basically twice. So the solution that we here put into place is, again, by means of a machine learning algorithm, which again, I think is very scalable. We're analyzing every incoming invoice and comparing it to similar invoices with respect to the small deviations that I have just motivated. And whenever we recognize duplicates, we leverage the action engine to forward these duplicate candidates to the accountant in order to help him or her to stop or cancel one of these invoices and to avoid the duplicate payment. Again, how does this look like in the application? So if I was an accountant, again in finance and looking at payment compliance, then I would permanently get some signals on potential duplicate invoices. And if I clicked on these, I would see that there are 2 invoices with identical reference numbers and very similar vendors that could be potential duplicate documents. And actually, each of them is worth $6,464. So by just preventing one duplicate, I'd already realized a value add of several thousands of dollars. And again, if I look below at the details, one of the possible root causes could be that I have an invoice or 2 invoices with the same document date, the same reference number, however, a very small deviation in the vendor that is printed on the invoice or scanned by my system. So instead of the special sign, it might read "and" on one invoice and as a sign on the other invoice. So given all other factors are the same, this is a subtle difference that is recognized by this algorithm, and I, as an accountant, again, would automatically be confronted with these candidates in order to judge on their similarity and in order to then cancel one of these invoices or delete the duplicate payment, in other words. But basically what's happening here is that I'm successfully canceling one of these 2 invoices. And I hope by means of these 4 very specific examples, you get a good idea of what's possible with the action engine. Actually, I'd say there are around 20 top use cases that we have implemented that we can also share after the webinar. But I wanted to make sure that you at least get to know the 4 top use cases among those popular ones. Naturally, we also have the same thing in procurement, where some topics that are relevant for other customers are the topics around purchase quality, so how to create optimal or perfect POs, fast PO processing, again, efficiency, and delivery reliability. Not going to jump into details, just such that you have heard it and contact me if you need to know more. And also we have the same thing around order management, where obviously the big task is how to use Action Engine for the order manager to proactively intervene in ongoing customer orders and deliver every customer order on time. That being said, I only have one last slide on the next steps. And the one thing that I want to highlight here is that nothing that I have presented today is too fancy. So actually, while I think those are very scalable and valuable use cases, actually implementing them is not a big issue. So I'd guess, I've written it down here, like implementing all of these presented use cases, if you're already connected to Celonis, would take less than a week. So that's why, if you're interested in that, I only recommend you to just think about which accounting department you want to try this out for, and then involve us or your implementation partners to simply implement those use cases and release Action Engine to your selected accountants. And we want to be very transparent. So if you recognize that this has the same value add for you, which it has turned out to be for the customers that I have presented, actually the topic of expanding this to other countries and units from a technical point of view is very, very easy. So that's why, as a last sentence, please don't hesitate to approach your Celonis contact or us at actionengine@celonis.com to trigger the next steps and get more information on the finance or other processes, and simply get a good idea of how you can leverage the possibilities for yourself. So then let's use the remaining 2 minutes to talk about some of the questions. So the first question is, first of all, what type of integration is required to start with the Action Engine? And the one requirement that you have to have is you already need to have a Celonis data model. If you have a Celonis data model, activating the Action Engine is actually very simple, and the Action Engine can simply then pull data from this data model. So that's, from a technical point of view, actually the main requirement, that you already have this Celonis data model. Second question is, this machine learning algorithm, would it be an additional module, or is this part of the Action Engine? So all the use cases that I have presented would be like packaged as a deliverable. So the use case I've pointed out, including the machine learning algorithm, would be something that is implemented on your side. So as a requirement, we would also like activate in the Celonis Intelligent Business Cloud, as an example, the machine learning workbench, which serves as a calculation engine in the background. But for you, it's not that complicated. So I just want to say that for you, implementing the use case comes with both the algorithm and this Action Engine configuration. Okay, I'm just randomly answering questions. So another one is, when you apply a correction in the ERP system from Celonis, is this transaction recorded in the table CDPOS and CDHDRs? So in short, how does SAP track the actions triggered by the Action Engine? And actually the action that we take in the Action Engine, they are triggered by means of the user that clicks on this action button. So it's as simple as that. You could basically call it like an acceleration of what the user would be doing manually otherwise. So again, you can identify this by just looking at the user who has conducted this change. All right. So looking, I think there are a couple of more questions, and I'm really happy for your interest and feedback on that. But for the sake of time, let me answer them separately and send them around to all of you together with this presentation, the recording, the complete list of top use cases, as well as like the answers to the questions that you have posted. So having said that, thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to you experience that yourself. Thank you.